Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not a knight, not a noble, not even a servant with honest work and a quiet corner to sleep in. You're a jester, a fool, a painted distraction in a room full of silk and sharpened knives. You wear bells so they hear you coming and motley so they never forget what you are. You mock their enemies, their clergy, and sometimes, if you're feeling brave, you mock them. But never too hard, never too long. Because in this world, the line between amusement and offence is the width of a smile, and even thinner when the wine runs out. Before the feast begins and you're dragged into the firelight to dance, do me one small favour. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I find it fascinating to see who's tuning in from around the world. And if you'd like early access to more of these grim history stories, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, get comfortable. Let's begin. You don't remember the moment they realised you were different, but someone does. It was probably when you wouldn't stop crying at the wrong time, or laughing at the right one. Or maybe it was how your limbs bent, or how your voice cracked too early, too often, and too loud. Perhaps you came into the world with a twisted spine or a squint, or maybe your face just looked too knowing for a child that small. Either way, the adults started looking at you sideways, some with pity, some with fear. But the worst of all looked at you with interest. You grow up in the margins of somewhere forgettable, a village that doesn't show up on maps and barely exists in memory, unless someone nearby gets murdered or married. Your family, if you can call them that, works the land badly and drinks away the bits they earn. You sleep near the hearth in the same itchy sack you were born in, and when it rains, you learn to hold your breath through the drip in the ceiling. Nobody talks about dreams here. You don't dream of escape. You barely dream at all. What you do notice, even early on, is that people laugh when you speak. Not at something you said, but at the fact that you said it. You ask questions other children don't. Why does the priest smell like wine? Why does the reeve have 3 pigs when you have none? Why does God only strike the poor with boils? Sometimes the laughter comes fast and forced, sometimes slow and cruel, but it comes all the same. At first you mistake it for affection, later you'll know better. The village idiot is old and drools in the corner of the tavern. You think you're different from him until one day you catch your reflection in a basin and see something eerily familiar. It's in the eyes, that strange twinkle of someone who notices too much and gets punished for it. But you keep talking because silence feels like death. You make up songs, you mimic the priest's lisp, you cross your eyes and pretend to bless chickens. The villagers call you clever with the same tone they use for cursed. One day, a man visits the village. He wears a dark green cloak, rides a horse with shoes better than yours, and doesn't smell like dung or smoke. The villagers straighten up when he enters the tavern. He's not nobility, but close enough to scare them. He's a steward, or an envoy, or something with a long title no one understands. You don't know what he's doing there, but you notice he watches you longer than anyone else. You are behind the tavern, doing your impression of the miller after too much cider, arms flailing, cheeks puffed, voice wheezing like a broken pipe. You thought he wasn't watching, but he was. The next day, your mother or aunt, or whoever lays vague claim to you, sits you down and tells you you're going away. Not with warmth, not with sorrow, more like someone handing off a sack of potatoes. She says it will be better for everyone. You ask if you'll get to come back. She doesn't answer. She just hands you a bundle, wrapped in linen, and walks away before you can open it. Inside is an old shirt that smells like wet goats, a heel of bread gone stiff with age, and a wooden cup with someone else's initials carved into the side. The steward doesn't speak to you directly. He speaks about you to the man driving the cart. This one, he says, might be useful. Not talented, not promising, not even tolerable, just useful. You sit in the back of the cart between two crates of squawking poultry and try not to throw up from the smell. You want to ask questions, but every time you open your mouth, the driver glares at you. Eventually, you learn to keep your thoughts inside your teeth. The journey takes days or maybe weeks. You lose track after the third cold night, and the second time, someone tries to steal the cart's wheel in a village too dark to name. You're not allowed to ride up front. You sleep on sacks of grain and learn to chew slowly, so the driver doesn't accuse you of eating too much. Sometimes he laughs at you. Sometimes he forgets you exist. The chickens get more consistent attention. The cart creaks through the outer gate just as the sun disappears behind the trees, painting the muddy courtyard in smudged grey and the kind of silence that always feels a little watched. The castle isn't as grand as you imagined, not the high towers and banners from a minstrel's tale, but a squatting mass of damp stone, half-choked in ivy, with chickens scratching between puddles and smoke rising in uneven trails from crooked chimneys. The air smells like wood ash, wet straw, and something meat-adjacent left out too long. No one greets you. The steward barely slows. A guard gives the cart a glance, then waves it through with the same enthusiasm he might give to a wagon full of turnips. You're not precious cargo. You're not even curious cargo. Just a boy in a too-big tunic clinging to a linen bundle and trying not to fall off the back of a rickety cart as it jostles through thick mud and shouting. The cart stops beside the stables and you're told to get off. That's it. No ceremony, no announcement, no introductions. The steward doesn't look at you when he hands your bundle back. "Follow," he says, already turning toward a side door. You stumble after him past a row of dung-slick stone troughs and an open kitchen window belching steam and the sound of someone screaming at someone else about leaks. You try not to stare, but everything feels sharp and large and strange. Walls too tall, doors too small. Windows where people peer out and vanish the moment you make eye contact. The steward leads you around the back of the keep, through a low arch and into a hallway that smells of boiled onion, scorched fat, and old wet wool. The floor is laid with rushes that squish unpleasantly underfoot, and the walls are streaked with soot and something stickier. Servants bustle past in every direction, eyes glazed with the kind of tired that never fully lifts. One of them bumps your shoulder without apology. Another glances down, does a double take and mutters, "Is that it?" before vanishing through a side door. You don't know what "it" means. You decide not to ask. You're taken up a narrow flight of stairs where the stone turns slick with condensation. The steward says nothing as he moves, and you're too out of breath to try. You pass a window carved deep into the wall, your first real glimpse of the courtyard from above. It's even smaller from up here, the castle's interior twisting in on itself like intestines. This place isn't built for glory. It's built to trap warmth, and perhaps people. Eventually the steward stops in front of a heavy door bound in iron. He knocks once, then pushes it open without waiting for a reply. Inside is a storage room, or maybe a steward's office. Dark, cramped, lined with shelves sagging under dusty ledgers and bolts of rough fabric. A man looks up from a desk stacked with slates, one hand already raised in a dismissive gesture, before he even registers your presence. Then he pauses. "Is this the one?" he asks. The steward shrugs. "He'll do." The man waves you in, makes a vague motion that might mean stand still or breathe quieter. He squints at you, like a farmer judging a sick lamb, then nods toward your bundle. "That all you brought?" You nod. He doesn't ask your name. He doesn't offer his. He just rummages through a chest by the wall, pulls out a scrap of parchment, scribbles something you can't read, and hands it to the steward. "He's yours now," he says. "Until he isn't." That's how it happens. Not a welcome, not a signing on. Just the passing of responsibility, like a bucket of turnips. The steward tucks the parchment into his coat and jerks his head toward the door. "Come on," he mutters. "You'll eat after the rest." You're too stunned to do anything but follow. You trail him down a dim corridor lined with hooks and cloaks, and the low murmur of tired voices. Every room you pass seems to hold something steaming, or dripping, or yelling. The castle pulses with a kind of low, constant tension. You try to match the steward's stride, but he's too fast and the rushes on the floor too slippery. Once you step on something that squelches and nearly go down. He doesn't stop to check if you've fallen. Eventually, you're led into the kitchen through a back entrance, and the noise hits like a slap. Pots clang. Fire crackles. Someone is singing off-key while chopping violently. The air smells of grease and charcoal and overcooked cabbage. The steward grabs a wooden bowl, slops something greyish and steaming into it, and thrusts it at you. "Eat," he says. "Don't take too long." You find a place on an upturned bucket near the hearth and balance the bowl in your lap. It's porridge, maybe, or mashed peas. It doesn't matter. It's warm. You eat fast, cheeks burning under the glances of half a dozen servants who clearly weren't warned you'd be joining them. No one sits beside you. Someone coughs and turns away. You keep your eyes on the bowl. When the meal's over, you're told to follow again, and you do, past the laundry cellars and the meat hooks, and a door that smells like pickled fish. As you're led through the corridor, you nearly bump into a man. He steps aside without comment, but his presence stops the steward mid-step. Tall, heavy-set, with fingers glittering under the torchlight, each hand weighed down with more rings than you've ever seen in one place. His robe is deep green velvet, clean in a way nothing else in the castle seems to be. He says nothing, just looks at you like you're a particularly ugly trinket someone left lying around. Then he flicks his hand, a gesture so slight it could have meant anything, and the steward nods, then ushers you forward. No words exchanged, just that flick, and everything moves. Finally, you reach a low alcove beside a staircase where a lumpy mattress has been shoved into a crooked corner, half covered with an old wool blanket and a dented tin cup beside it. A candle stub on the ledge above drips wax onto the stone. The steward stops and points. "Here," he says, "don't wander, don't touch anything, and when you hear bells, move." You nod, though you don't really understand what that means. He leaves without another word, and you're alone. You set your bundle down at the foot of the mattress and sit slowly, testing the straw-stuffed cushion. It sags like a dead sheep. You listen to the sounds drifting through the stone. Footsteps, doors creaking, fire popping somewhere distant. Occasionally you hear laughter, sharp and sudden, followed by silence. You wonder who's laughing. You wonder who's being laughed at. This isn't a room. It's not even a cell. It's a leftover space, a slot in the wall too awkward for shelves and too exposed for privacy. It's not inside, not truly, but it's not outside either. You're placed like an afterthought. Not part of the household, not fully servant, certainly not guest. Just there. The blanket smells faintly of smoke and something sour. You pull it over your legs and lie back, staring at the stone above you. It's low enough that you could touch it without sitting up. Your eyes don't quite adjust to the dark, but you see flickers of movement from the hallway. A shadow passing. The flicker of a rushlight. The castle doesn't sleep. It just slows. You pull the bundle close to your chest, suddenly aware of how far you are from anything you recognise. Your limbs ache. Your eyes burn. You haven't been told what you'll do tomorrow. You haven't been told anything at all. They haven't dressed you in anything yet. They haven't asked you to perform, but the moment you stepped through that gate, you felt it settle onto your shoulders, like a second skin. You don't know what the joke is yet. You only know that it's already begun. The next evening you receive your uniform. It's left on a bench outside the wardrobe room without a word. No ceremony, no instruction. No one watches you receive it. Just a lumpy bundle of wool in a chaotic mess of colours. Reds, greens, yellows, all in patches that seem stitched together by someone with a grudge against matching fabric. It takes you a moment to realise this is your uniform. You thought they'd bring it to you, maybe hand it over with a smirk and a warning. But no, It's just sitting there, dumped like a sack of spoiled carrots, already smelling faintly of mildew, vinegar, and human anxiety. You touch it cautiously, half expecting it to bite. The wool is scratchy and stiff with old sweat. The seams thick and uneven. A few of the patches are so worn they've nearly gone transparent. The outfit sags like it remembers other bodies wearing it. Heavier ones, or perhaps just older ones who stayed in it longer. You wonder how many fools wore this before you, and how many of them stopped being fools before they stopped breathing. Bells are sewn into the hems, tiny brass ones that jingle with even the smallest shift in weight. They're not cheerful. They're not festive. They're a leash that makes sound. When you move, you announce yourself. When you try to hide, they tell on you. When you lie still at night, they remind you you're still wearing the role. You shake your sleeve once, experimentally. The sound is soft but endless. A warning in miniature. You're not allowed to be quiet now. Not truly. Not ever again. There's a hat too. A soft, drooping thing with 3 floppy horns and more bells. It looks like it used to be red, or something close to it, but now it's the shade of a scab left in the sun. When you pick it up, something falls out of it. A small scrap of parchment, stained and folded. You open it with nervous fingers. There's no writing, just a small smear of dried blood, and the imprint of a thumbnail, where someone once pressed it closed. You stare at it for a long time before crumpling it and tossing it into the hearth. Whatever message it once held, it's not yours to carry. You're not given a room to change in, just told to get into costume and come back when the bells can be heard down the corridor. You dress behind a rack of linens, your fingers trembling as you fumble with laces stiff with age and grime. The tunic doesn't fit properly, too tight at the armpits, too loose at the waist, and the leggings are held together by more hope than thread. When you finally wriggle into the whole ensemble, it feels less like clothing and more like skin you can't peel off. They give you a stick. Not a staff or a baton, a stick. It's about 2 feet long, carved from ashwood, and tipped with a bloated, stitched pig's bladder that squeaks when squeezed and smacks with a wet sort of bounce. You're told it's your tool, your symbol, your companion. You ask, cautiously, what it's for. The man handing it over shrugs. You hit people with it, or they hit you. Or sometimes it just waves around while you make an ass of yourself, whatever the moment calls for. He walks off without elaborating. The first time you walk across the flagstones in full costume, the bells feel like judgment. You try to move quietly, but it's impossible. The jingling announces every shift of your shoulders, every uncertain step. Servants glance up from their chores. Some smirk, others roll their eyes. A few look away entirely, as if staring might make it contagious. You try to stand straighter, but the wool pulls strangely across your chest, and the hat slips forward over your brow, dragging one horn down across your eye. You catch your reflection in a polished metal tray hanging in the kitchen corridor. At first, you don't recognise the figure looking back. The colours are too loud. The proportions are wrong. The grin, plastered on your own face, forced and hollow, makes your teeth look crooked. You stare, unmoving, watching this strange creature shimmer faintly in the convex surface. The motley makes your limbs look bonier, your eyes wider, your body both exaggerated and reduced. You're a caricature of yourself, a joke that walks, a shadow in paint and bells. You try to smile just to see how it looks, but the face in the metal doesn't change. The corners of your mouth twitch, but your eyes stay still. It's an uncanny thing, watching yourself pretend to be someone you never asked to become. You lean in closer, nose nearly touching the tray until the reflection blurs. Behind you, a scullery maid walks past without acknowledging you. You don't blame her. The first time they tell you to perform, it comes without warning. One moment you're hunched on your cot, trying to figure out how to sleep without setting off the bells, and the next, a kitchen boy is poking his head into your alcove, saying, "You're wanted in the hall, now." You don't ask why, you just put the hat back on, grip the bladder stick like it might help, and follow the flickering torchlight through twisting corridors that feel smaller than they did the day before. Your feet slap softly against the flagstones. The bells jingle with every step, echoing ahead of you like a warning to whoever's listening. You don't know what they expect you to do when you get there. You only know it has to be funny. The doors to the hall are already open. Firelight spills across the rushes, and the smell of meat still lingers, sharp and greasy. You step in slowly, blinking at the brightness after the dim corridors. Nobles lounge at long tables, wiping gravy from their chins and licking wine from their teeth. A few glance up. One nudges another. Someone groans. Not him again, you think you hear, but it's swallowed by the general noise. You keep walking. You can't afford to turn back. The man with the rings is seated at the high table, slouched sideways with a cup of something deep red and expensive in one hand. He waves his fingers lazily, a signal you've come to understand as equal parts command and boredom. You take your place on the open floor beside the fire pit, where the light casts odd shadows across your face and makes the bells flash just enough to keep their attention. You're not given a script. There is no list. You're here to be amusing, and what that means changes depending on how much they've had to drink, how foul the meat was, and who insulted whom during the main course. You start with a voice, one of the chamberlains, reedy and nasal, with a stammer that only disappears when he's angry. You puff out your chest and strut in a slow circle, mimicking the way he lectures servants about dust on candlesticks, while pretending not to notice his own wig is crooked. It gets a few snorts. You hear the clink of goblets, the scrape of someone turning on a bench to watch more closely. Encouraged, you move on to the bishop's latest sermon, which had all the fire of wet parchment. You wobble your knees and flap your arms, declaring that God loves the noble-born most, because they taste less like onions when they die. That gets a laugh. Not a roaring one, but enough. You're still standing. You take it as permission. Being a fool, you've quickly realised, has very little to do with actual jokes. It's about timing. It's about tone. But more than anything, it's about tension. Lifting it when it threatens to crack the walls, or poking it just enough to release the pressure without setting the whole place ablaze. Every noble here has some grievance they're too polite to shout and too proud to swallow. Your job is to say it for them, sideways, dressed like a puppet and smiling like you don't understand a word you're saying. After that first night's performance, you begin to add to your routine. You walk a tightrope made of silk and spite, and some nights it frays underfoot. You learn to read the room by smell and silence. If the wine is strong and the meat plentiful, they'll laugh harder. If the taxes were just collected, they'll laugh less. If the Lord's wife is staring holes through the night 2 seats down, you don't mention marriage. If a messenger arrived this morning with news from the border, you don't mention war. You don't ask questions, you imply answers. You don't accuse, you resemble. Every syllable is wrapped in a wink and a dance. If they pretend not to notice the insult, you pretend it wasn't one. One night, early on, you call a noble's hunting dog the better air, and the room goes deathly quiet. You freeze mid-gesture, hat slipping slightly over one eye, but then the noble chuckles, just once, just enough, and the laughter returns like floodwaters. You bow low and leave the joke unfinished. Everyone understands exactly what you meant. No one says it aloud. They say you're protected, that fools have license to speak what others cannot. That you are, in some twisted way, sacred, but you've already seen one of the kitchen boys dismissed for laughing at the wrong punchline. And you overheard the laundress whisper that a jester in another household once mimicked the wrong lord's limp and ended up strung from the rafters for being too convincing. Protection, in your experience, is mostly a myth people use to make cruelty feel ceremonial. Your stick helps. The bladder end gives a satisfying wobble when you thwack yourself in the head after a bad joke, and it makes a farting sound when slapped against your hip. which always earns at least a smile from someone near the end of the table. You use it to point at people, to signal the punchline, to underscore the absurd. But you've also noticed how it's shaped like a club, lightweight, padded, but still a stick. You wonder if it was meant for your defence or if it's simply a reminder of your role. A fool with a stick looks funny. A fool without one just looks frightened. The laughter becomes addictive. You find yourself chasing it, even when your better sense tells you to stop. You stretch a joke too long, milk a gag for an extra beat, trying to get one more chuckle from the wine-soaked man slumped beside the banister. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, the silence that follows is cold and wet, like stepping barefoot into a pond at midnight. You try new things, rhymes, riddles, juggling when someone tosses you fruit, slipping into the cadence of nobles arguing about which lands are most fertile, using absurd crops like onions and turnips. They laugh. You laugh with them. You never laugh first, but some nights it turns. A joke lands flat, or worse, hits too well. You mimic the way the steward always clutches his stomach after dinner, and he turns pale. Not embarrassed, furious. His hand goes to the knife at his belt before he remembers where he is and, more importantly, who else is watching. You feel your mouth go dry, but then someone else laughs, louder than they need to, and the danger passes. You bow again, lower this time. Gratitude in posture. And then there's the night with the haircut. You don't plan it. You're pacing in front of the fire, making up a story about a knight who was so ugly his helmet refused to stay on. And you glance at the man seated near the dais. He's younger than the rest, smug and shiny, with a fringe of golden curls arranged so precisely they look painted on. And before you can stop yourself, the words are already tumbling out, something about a rooster and a wig maker and a mirror that cracked in self-defence. There's a second of silence, not long, just enough to know you've gambled something. And then the young man snorts, loud, almost ugly. He claps once, sloshing wine on his sleeve. He's not wrong, he says, ruffling his own hair, with theatrical annoyance. Laughter follows, louder this time, relieved. You grin, you bow. You press a hand to your chest as if to say, I was only jesting. But deep down, you know you weren't. That's the trick of it. The best jokes aren't fiction. They're just the truth, wearing bells. One night, a noblewoman laughs too hard at one of your jokes, and her husband watches her the way a butcher watches a pig that's learned to open its pen. You see the moment her face changes. The laugh slows, her shoulders stiffen, her eyes dart sideways. He doesn't say a word. He doesn't need to. You step back, bow, and change the subject with a fart noise from your bladder stick, which thankfully gets a snort from the night across the table and resets the room's temperature. It's your third close call this week. You begin to understand that court is not a place, but a performance. The throne is just a chair. The hall is just stone. What makes it dangerous is that everything here is pretending not to be dangerous. The smiles are weapons. The silences are traps. You walk through rooms of satin and silver, but every step is across something sharp. Pride, jealousy, ambition. And you're the only one in the castle who's expected to step on all of it and smile while you bleed. They call on you more often now. Not because they like you, but because you're useful. You say what they can't. You turn gossip into rhyme. You make fun of the man no one else dares name, and if he laughs, they laugh too. If he doesn't, they stare at their goblets and pretend not to know you. You are a pressure valve in motley. You keep the cracks in the ceiling from spreading. Sometimes a noble will beckon you after a meal, just as the servants are clearing away the bread trenches and scraping up the chicken bones. He'll ask you to tell a joke, but not any joke, that joke. The one you told last week about the friar and the sheep, or the one about the reeve with the three-legged pig. But you can't remember exactly how you told it then, and you sense he's not actually interested in laughing. He's testing you, testing whether the joke still bites, or if you've grown cautious. You retell it anyway. They always prefer a dangerous fool to a cautious one, at least in public. Caution is for backrooms and midnight summons. Laughter, like wine, is best served strong and slightly poisoned. You begin to notice the way people look at you when you speak. Not just watching, but measuring. You are not a person to them. You're a mirror with a voice, and they're always waiting to see what kind of reflection you'll offer. A flattering one that smooths over their blemishes, or a cruel one that exposes something raw beneath the powder. The younger nobles tease you, but it's the older ones who frighten you. They don't laugh as much. They've survived too many changes in fashion, in power, in kings. They know how quickly favour turns. They watch you like chess players study the board. You know that if you ever stop being useful, they'll sweep you aside without pause or pity. Sometimes a lady will slip you a scrap of meat from her plate, or a servant will whisper a joke for you to use later. A safe one. Something about the baker's baldness, or the bishop's gout. You collect these like charms, little offerings to the gods of survival. Not because they're funny, but because you know who said them, and how important it is to use them in just the right way, in front of just the right person, at just the right moment. You learn to use silence. Not every performance requires words. Sometimes you just sit beside the hearth during dinner and watch the lords with a blank expression, head tilted, bells softly chiming. That's often funnier than anything you could say. They fill the silence for you. One man gets nervous and starts explaining a hunting story no one asked about. Another laughs, too loud at nothing. Sometimes silence draws more attention than a jest. And attention, if wielded well, is its own kind of threat. You begin to understand how close you are to everything. You hear things others aren't meant to hear. Whispered insults between bites of venison, names mentioned in fear, laughter that dies too quickly. You watch two nobles argue with their eyebrows during a toast and know instinctively that someone's about to disappear. You see the messages passed hand to hand during feasts. You are not in these games, but you're always on the board. Sometimes you're asked to repeat what you've seen, not directly. A casual question, a suggestion, a joke about someone who hasn't arrived yet. You play dumb. You say you weren't listening. They laugh. Not because you're funny, but because your refusal confirms their suspicion that you're smarter than you look. That makes you more interesting and more dangerous. One afternoon, a steward you barely know pulls you aside and says the Lord liked your little song last night. You nod. He leans closer and adds, he liked it very much. You should be careful what you like too much. Then he walks away, leaving the scent of ink and sweat hanging behind him. You replay every verse of the song in your mind that night, wondering which line was the blade. There are games you're not meant to understand, but you're expected to juggle them anyway. You mock a visiting noble's accent, and he laughs so hard he slaps the table. But 2 nights later, the cook tells you his cousin was sent home with a broken nose and a severed purse string. Too much laughing, she says, and shrugs. You never joke about his accent again. Then there's the incident with the falconer. You make a passing remark about the birds being smarter than their handlers. A throwaway line, barely loud enough to hear. Most of the table chuckles, but later you find a dead mouse on your cot with a broken neck and a single feather tucked behind its ear. You say nothing. You burn the mouse in the kitchen hearth while no one's looking. You start checking under your blanket before you sleep. There's a weight that builds behind every laugh. You feel it pressing against your ribs. It's not fear exactly. Fear would be simpler. It's the knowledge that you're a hinge on which other people's grudges turn. You can tilt the room with a smile, but if you tilt it wrong, you're the one who falls into the fire. Some nights you wish they'd just tell you what the rules are, but they won't. That's part of the test. You're not valuable because you're funny. You're valuable because you know when to be funny and when not to be. There's a difference. The jokes themselves begin to feel less like performances and more like weapons. Dull ones, improvised, dangerous to swing. You learn to shape them like parables. One nobleman is mocked as a greedy pig, and you pair it with a story about a pig. who ate all the apples and ended up too fat to escape the butcher's block. The table erupts with laughter. You don't mention his name. You don't have to. But not everyone laughs. You notice a few people who never smile when you perform. They watch without reacting, forks paused halfway to their mouths. They remember every word you say. You wonder if they write it down, if someone somewhere is keeping score. And then one night, just as the moon hangs low and the candles have guttered down to stubs, you're roused from your straw mattress by the same steward who handed you your costume weeks ago. He says nothing at first, just stands in your doorway, looking down at you like he's not quite sure you're awake. Then he says, "The Lord wants a word." Now. You don't ask why, you just get up, dress and follow. The bells on your sleeves are muffled with cloth, but you still hear them faintly, like a heartbeat you can't control. You're not sure which joke it was. You only hope it was one worth remembering. You don't sleep much after that summons. The Lord never raises his voice. He just asks you to repeat the joke, slower this time, and explain what you meant by it. You do carefully, peeling it apart like bread gone mouldy, hoping the dissection kills the humour before it kills you. He chuckles once, then waves you off. You're not sure if that's a reprieve or a warning. Either way, you return to your cot with your stomach knotted and your bells muffled beneath your blanket. By now, you've been in court long enough to feel the seasons shift without ever stepping outside. The motley doesn't itch as much, but that's only because your skin gave up fighting it. One day, someone new comes to court. The boy arrives in the middle of a feast, announced like a novelty. He tumbles into the great hall on his hands, legs flailing in the air, bells on his feet jingling like wedding silver. The nobles roar with laughter before he even speaks. His motley is brighter than yours ever was, fresh stitched and clean, still holding the shape of the tailor's dummy. His voice carries like a crier's, crisp and theatrical, and his jokes, rehearsed, rhythmic, polished, strike like arrows at all the right targets. He has a grin like someone who doesn't yet know what grins cost. You're introduced not by name, you don't have one anymore, but by category. "Our own Jester," someone says with an exaggerated bow, like they're presenting a faithful old hound. "Broken in and mostly house-trained." The room laughs. You do too, because anything else would be dangerous. The boy, he can't be more than 12, gives you a nod. He means it kindly, which somehow makes it worse. They let him perform that night. You're told to sit and watch. Not in the shadows where you usually belong, but on a stool near the fire where everyone can see you seeing him. His act is good. You hate that it's good. He mimics the steward's pompous stride with perfect exaggeration, adds a song about noble flatulence that even you wouldn't have dared, and juggles 3 apples while reciting a dirty version of the Lord's Prayer. You watch each laugh build like a brick wall around you. The boy is from another court, loaned for the season, or maybe traded like livestock. You hear a lady at the high table say she hopes he stays. "He's just so fresh," she beams. The word lands in your stomach like a stone. You feel older than you are. You feel worn. You feel watched. After the performance, the Lord with the rings, the one who barely acknowledged your existence when you first arrived, waves the boy over and hands him a gilded goblet filled with something that smells expensive. "Good work," he says, and then almost as an afterthought, calls you over too. "Our own fool's seen better days, haven't you?" he asks. You nod, the bells on your collar tinkling like coins. Perhaps you two can learn from each other. You're given a joint performance the following night. They sit you side by side and tell you to make each other laugh. You know what this is. It's not camaraderie, it's sport. They want to see who's faster, who's sharper, who bleeds more amusingly. You toss a line. He parries. He sings a rhyme. You counter with a limerick. It goes well, until it doesn't. You mimic his squeaky voice just a little too well, and the room howls. The boy flinches but recovers, dancing across the floor and calling you grandfather fool. Someone throws a pear at your head. You duck too late. They cheer like they've witnessed art. Later that night, while you're removing your bells beside the fire grate, the boy finds you. He sits cross-legged and says, "They're not laughing the same way at me anymore." You don't answer. He looks smaller without the lights, less polished. "Do you ever get used to it?" he asks. You do answer this time. "No," you say. You just get quieter. It's not just jesters. Minstrels come through as well, lutes slung over their backs, fingers ink-stained from writing verses about people who never existed. They sing of kings and crusades, of maidens and dragons and harvests that don't end in frostbite. Their songs are lies but beautiful ones, and the nobles weep into their goblets. Afterward, you're told to lighten the mood, as if grief for fictional suffering needs to be washed down with real humiliation. You do a bit about noblemen who confuse goats for lovers. They laugh so hard wine sprays from a lady's nose. The minstrels get coin, you don't. They bow and move on, you stay. Some nights the court decides to be clever themselves. A knight with too much wine will rise and declare he's going to tell your jokes tonight. The others laugh before he even starts. He butchers the rhythm, stomps the punchline, forgets the ending halfway through, and blames the wine. You're expected to clap and cheer like a loyal understudy. If you correct him, you're sulking. If you outdo him, you're rude. So you sit and laugh and feel the floor tilt. Sometimes they tell you jokes, cruel fumbling ones. A lady once asked if you jingle in bed. A squire asked if you were born with the bells or stitched into them like a dog's collar. You laugh every time. They expect it. They need it. Your laughter absolves them. You learn how to twist your face into expressions they enjoy. A wide grin, a shocked gasp, a fake tear. You become a gallery of masks they don't know how to wear themselves. They want to be clever. You let them feel clever. You feed them their own egos with a silver spoon and then thank them for the opportunity. The boy doesn't last long. One night, he slips while doing a backflip and smashes his shoulder on the edge of the hearth. The laughter is instant and enormous, louder than any you ever earned. Someone shouts that he should do it again. Another calls him a drunken duck. He's helped up, smiling too hard, eyes wide with panic. He doesn't cry until he's behind the curtain. The next morning, he's gone. No one mentions him again. No replacement arrives. You return to the floor alone, but something's shifted. The nobles are more attentive now, not warmer, just hungrier. They liked watching two fools bite at each other. Now they want to see how far you'll go to keep your spot. They call on you for crueler work, mocking guests, slandering servants, impersonating old allies to their faces. You dance through it as best you can, but the line you walk feels thinner than ever. The applause comes slower, the smiles sharper. One evening, you're told to perform for a visiting baron and his wife. You put on your usual routine, a few rhymes, a bumbling priest, a fart joke tucked into a prayer. The baron chuckles politely. His wife doesn't laugh at all. Afterward, your lord pulls you aside and says, "They weren't impressed. Try harder next time." You nod, even though you're not sure what else there is to try. That night, you sit on your cot with the motley folded in your lap. Still warm from your body, the bells are tangled, the collar is stained with something that won't wash out. You don't cry, you haven't in some time, but you sit there longer than usual, staring at the patchwork and wondering if it's ever been washed properly, or if every fool leaves something of himself in the seams. You thought they wanted laughter. You thought they needed distraction. But now you understand. They don't laugh because it's funny. They laugh because you're trying so hard to please them. They laugh because you fail. Because you flinch. Because you pretend not to notice when the punchline lands on you instead of anyone else. And the truth settles in like damp wool against your back. They don't enjoy the fool. They enjoy the squirm. The bishop arrives in a carriage with wheels as tall as your chest and a cross carved so deeply into the door that you wonder if it was meant to keep something in rather than out. He's dressed in red, rings gleaming even brighter than the Lord's, and carries himself like someone who hasn't doubted a word he's said in 30 years. The court rises when he enters the hall. Even the dogs seem to sit straighter. You're not introduced, you're summoned. After the feast, after the prayers, after the bishop delivers a sermon, so long it curdles the wine in your stomach, you're brought forward with a wave of the Lord's hand. The bishop doesn't look at you at first, just sips his wine and murmurs something to the man beside him. You suspect it's a warning or a wager. You hope it's both. You're told to make him laugh. Religious men are the hardest to perform for. Not because they don't enjoy jokes, but because when they do laugh, it's always with one hand resting on the edge of the blade. You start simple. A rhyme about fish on Fridays, a pun about relics that smell suspiciously like sheep bones, a mimicry of a village priest whose sermons wander off halfway through and come back drunk. The bishop does not laugh, the Lord does. That's enough to keep you breathing. So you press on, cautiously. The room is still. You feel the way your words land, heavy and deliberate. You joke about saints who keep losing their heads, about monks who sell salvation in bottles, about a confessor so pious he never stopped talking long enough to listen. Somewhere in the middle of the third tale, the bishop smiles. Just a flicker, but enough to tilt the room toward warmth. The next morning, you're complimented. The steward says the bishop enjoyed himself, and that the Lord was pleased with your restraint. The word sticks, restraint. As if everything you didn't say was part of the act. As if silence is just another kind of performance. You nod, grateful, but you file it away. You're not being praised for wit. You're being rewarded for walking a line they refuse to draw for you. You begin to notice the pattern. When the court is tense, when news from the border is grim, or a noble has died suspiciously early, or the crops fail without enough rain to justify it, you're sent out to joke about God. Not directly, never directly, but in symbols, in implication. You mock the bishop's second cousin. You mimic a choir boy who forgets the Latin. You invent a friar who mistakes sheep for sinners and baptizes a whole flock in a well. Sometimes they laugh, sometimes they don't. But the permission is always temporary. You say the wrong thing, or say the right thing at the wrong moment, and suddenly it's not satire, it's blasphemy, and you won't know which until someone else decides. During Lent, the rules change. You're not expected to stop performing, but your content must be appropriate. No more jokes about indulgences or virgin saints with suspiciously frequent pregnancies. You're told to be edifying. You try. You write a short play in which a jester is visited by 3 holy men who each try to save his soul. In the end, he agrees to repentance, but only after they agree to lighten their purses. You think it's clever. The Lord chuckles. The bishop calls it concerning. You're not punished, not directly, but the next day your stew is half as full and the cook won't meet your eyes. Then comes the plague. It doesn't arrive with fanfare, just a few empty seats at dinner, a sealed door in the west wing, and a priest who walks the halls swinging incense and muttering faster than usual. You're told not to speak of it. So of course you do. Your first joke is quiet, about rats in hats and fleas with titles. It gets a stifled laugh from a page boy and a snort from one of the guards. The second joke is louder, about a noble who washes in wine because water offends him. That one gets silence. You retreat into mimicry for a few days. No one reprimands you, but no one laughs either. It's hard to laugh when the coughing starts. Then one night, after a heavy meal and too much fear-tinged wine, the Lord asks you to perform. Something light, he says, gesturing at the half-empty table. Lift us. You try. You make the jokes safe, shallow. You joke about bedpans, about chambermaids who snore, about the steward's fear of spiders. But it's not enough. They want you to laugh for them. So you do? You slap your face. You fake a seizure. You joke that if you die of plague, at least you'll die clean, finally scrubbed down by holy water and fire. They laugh at that. Too hard. And just like that, you're useful again. But the risk grows. You learn that some jokes aren't yours to write. One day, a folded piece of parchment appears on your cot. No name, no mark, just 3 lines of rhyme and a crude drawing of a monk chasing a chicken. You perform it that night, not because you think it's funny, but because you recognise the handwriting. The Lord's younger brother, who likes to see his wit in someone else's mouth. The joke lands. The bishop does not laugh. The next day, your shoes are missing. Another time, you're handed a full script, 5 minutes of finely crafted satire about a corrupt cardinal and his suspicious number of nephews. It's clever. It's sharp. It's not yours. You're told to perform it before the bishop's next visit. You do. The room erupts with laughter. The bishop leaves without finishing his wine. You wake the next morning with a bruise on your ribs and no memory of how you got it. You begin to understand that even when they feed you the lines, you're still the one bleeding for them. Your license to mock the church is written in dust and disappears the moment someone blows too hard. You start each day not knowing whether your joke will be repeated or redacted, whether your performance will be clapped for or condemned, and when the line shifts, it's not moved, it vanishes. One moment, you're a truth speaker in motley. The next, a heretic with bells, and you begin to hear the phrase you dread most. He went too far, not shouted, whispered, always past tense. It finally happens after a feast in late spring. The bishop has returned for some minor ceremony no one explains. You've been told to behave. No saints, no relics, no popes in nightgowns. You nod. You plan to stick to safe material. But midway through a light routine about laundry and lice, a noble shouts from the back, "Tell the one about Saint Humbert and the goat." You freeze. The joke isn't yours. You've only ever heard it once in the kitchens from a drunken squire who swore the bishop would find it hilarious. You hesitate. The room waits. You tell it. You water it down. You soften the ending. The bishop does not laugh. You're dismissed early. No applause. No eye contact. You bow, step backward, and leave the hall without breathing. You make it to your cot before the pain comes. You don't see who hits you. You don't hear the first blow. But when you wake, hours later, maybe days, your jaw doesn't close properly, and something hard and white rolls loose in your mouth. A tooth, one of the ones near the front. You spit it into your hand and stare at it. It's not bloody anymore, just small and pale and useless, like the rest of you. You don't leave your mat for 2 days, maybe 3. Time gets slippery when you're too swollen to chew and too bruised to sleep properly. No one visits you, but someone leaves stale bread near your feet each morning, as if feeding a half-forgotten animal. You spend the time counting cracked beams in the ceiling and wondering which joke it was that crossed the line. Not the words, but the moment, that invisible flicker when a smirk becomes a sentence. Eventually, the pain dulls enough for you to move without flinching, and the swelling retreats to a manageable lump near your jaw. They don't ask if you're ready to leave. They don't even tell you where you're going. A servant wakes you before dawn, nudges your shoulder with the heel of her boot and says, "You're to pack, bring the bells." You sit up slowly, jaw throbbing, the memory of fists still settling in your bones. One side of your face is purple. Your mouth tastes like old pennies and meat gone sour. You're still not sure who hit you, but whoever it was hit you with the full weight of God's disapproval. The castle is in motion, not bustling but evacuating. Carts creak beneath barrels and boxes. Horses snort and stamp as servants fasten saddlebags. You see nobles standing in doorways, in half-dressed panic, barking orders that go ignored. A few of them eye you as you pass, like they're checking whether the jester still walks, whether you're part of the furniture they meant to bring, or something they accidentally left out in the rain. The plague has returned, or maybe it never left. You've lost count of how many waves it's been. Each time it's quieter and worse. Fewer bodies piled at once, but more forgotten where they fell. The city stinks of rot and smoke, and the castle windows have been shuttered for weeks. Not to keep out the cold, but to keep out the coughing. It didn't work. You're loaded onto the same wagon as the cook's boy. 2 barrels of salted fish and a covered cage full of hens. The bells on your costume jingle every time the cart hits a rut, and by the 3rd hour, the driver threatens to cut them off with a carving knife. You believe him? You keep still. The new manor is smaller, colder, and perched high enough on a hill that the wind howls like it's looking for a throat to bite. The main hall smells like it hasn't been aired since the last fool died here. A mix of mouse droppings, damp stone, and leftover incense. You're given a corner near the hearth, though the hearth itself isn't lit until nightfall, and even then, only when someone important feels a chill. They tell you to perform the first night, as if nothing has changed. You make a joke about rats wearing masks. It gets a few strained chuckles. Someone coughs. Someone else leaves the room. You pretend not to notice. That becomes the new rule. Pretend not to notice. There are fewer people now, fewer servants, fewer nobles, fewer laughs, but still enough to demand entertainment. They expect you to lift spirits, to fill the spaces where voices used to be. You're told to cheer up a dining hall where half the guests haven't shown up, and one of the remaining ones won't eat anything but wine-soaked pears. You dance, you fall down, you tell the same 3 jokes in slightly different orders, hoping the wine has dulled their memory enough to laugh again. It usually has. War arrives not with a trumpet, but with a tax. The Lord begins selling furniture, then livestock, then loyalty. There are new banners in the hall, and new guests with names you're not meant to remember. Some speak your language, some don't. You joke anyway. When they laugh, you feel safe. When they don't, you look to the Lord, praying he's too tired to be offended on your behalf. You perform for men in armour who smell like blood and horse piss, and they clap you on the back hard enough to bruise. One tells you to mimic the enemy commander, and when you hesitate, he grips your shoulder and says, "We'll find another fool if you're not funny." You do the impression. You give the commander a squeaky voice, and a hunchback, and a fondness for kissing horses. They laugh so loud, you can't hear your own heartbeat for a moment. You hope that means you'll survive the night. You attend funerals now, not as a mourner, as a sideshow. They bury knights and squires with muddy boots and crooked prayers. You stand by the gravesite in full motley, juggling apples gone soft in the centre, while the priest mumbles a half-remembered psalm. You're not part of the rite, you're the punctuation. You distract the living from how easily the dead have started to disappear. One morning, you're woken early and told to perform in the courtyard for a group of mercenaries before they ride out. You pull on your costume, still damp from last night's storm, and slip twice in the mud before you even reach the gathering. One of the men throws you a coin before you speak. You thank him in rhyme. Another throws a bone. It hits your knee. You rhyme that too. They laugh. You don't stop until they're gone. You lose another tooth 2 weeks later, though this one isn't from a fist. It just falls out into your hand while you're drinking from a chipped cup. You stare at it a long while before tucking it into a crack in the wall behind your sleeping mat. You tell no one. It feels like something you should keep hidden, like rot that spreads faster when seen. You begin to recognise the look nobles get when they're deciding whether or not to laugh. It's not joy, it's calculation. Their lives are shrinking. Their allies are dying. Their fortunes are unravelling like poorly knotted thread. Your jokes don't make them happy. They make them feel clever for understanding the joke. That's enough most nights. You develop new material, shorter, sharper, less personal. No more jokes about noble marriages or fat bishops. Now it's bodily humour, barnyard comparisons, safer nonsense. You do a bit where you trip over your own feet and blame it on your bells being cursed. They like that. You do it again 3 nights in a row. On the 4th, no one laughs, and someone throws a chicken leg. You catch it mid-air. They laugh at that. You don't sleep well. The coughing comes through the walls again. Someone in the kitchen dies and you're given their blanket. It's still warm. You wrap it around your shoulders and don't ask who it belonged to. You're not sure if asking makes it worse. One afternoon, you find yourself rehearsing alone in the garden. What's left of it? You try out a new voice for a fictional friar, pitching it high and nasal, adding in a limp for good measure. No one is watching. No one asked. You just need to know whether it works. You finish the bit and realise you've started laughing. Not a loud laugh, just a breath. A wheeze, something that feels like laughter's ghost. It scares you more than silence. You become very good at pretending not to notice what's missing. Weeks pass. The court wanders for a while, fleeing plague here, dodging a skirmish there, before the Lord finally declares it safe enough to return. By then, the rats have reclaimed the larder, and the tapestries hang stiff with mildew, but the castle is still standing. So are you. Barely. The fever took 2 maids, a steward, and one of the Baron's dogs. Nobody mourns the steward. The dog gets a poem. The great hall is quieter now, thinner, but the routines resume. Supper, song, laughter where it's expected. You're still the jester, still wearing the bells, still expected to fill the gaps in other people's grief with something resembling mirth. You do your part, you always do, and when the clapping stops, you return to your corner, the one nobody else wants, the one that still smells like you never left. You don't know what it says about you that you miss the plague. Not the death, obviously. Not the smell, not the endless funerals, not the bell ringers with black cloths tied around their faces. But at least back then, there was noise, a kind of urgency. Every meal might have been your last, which made the laughter more desperate, more real. Now the castle feels like it's waiting for something to end. The servants move quieter, the nobles drink slower, even the fire in the great hall seems to burn with less conviction, and still you perform. You return to your corner after the show. Not a room, not a bedchamber, not even a cell. Just the same draughty stone alcove near the kitchen door, where a pile of old straw and a warped bench have learned to accept your shape. Someone left you a blanket once. You folded it up and used it as a pillow for 3 nights, before the steward took it back for a visiting priest. Now you use your motley, the one not fit for public viewing, as cover. It smells like mildew and dried sweat and something vaguely like rot, but it's yours, at least until someone else needs it. You don't go to the servants' quarters. They don't want you there. It's not spoken, just understood. The cook pretends she doesn't see you if you pass by the fire too close. The stable boys flinch if you nod at them. The washerwomen laugh at your jokes, but only when the nobles are watching. Afterward, they cross themselves. You don't blame them. You're not one of them. You're not one of anyone. You've become the jester-shaped hole in everyone's life. Present, but not touchable. Familiar, but not trusted. They laugh with you on feast days and pray against you on fast days. You're the only person in the castle expected to speak truth, and the only one who'll be punished for it. And so you walk the halls like a ghost with bells, drifting from corridor to corridor, nodding politely to guards who never nod back. Your meals come from what's left over. Not scraps exactly. Those go to the dogs, but the parts nobody wants to admit were cooked in the first place. Burnt turnips, bread crusts that could slice a knuckle, greasy hunks of meat too gristled to chew. You chew them anyway. It passes the time. Sometimes you hum little tunes while you eat, just to remind yourself you still can. Sometimes you tell jokes to the bread, just to see if they land better than they did with the Baron last week. The bread is a more forgiving audience. You've been here 15 years by your count. You develop a talent for silence. It's an art form, really. How to step without creaking floorboards. How to breathe around snoring nobles without making them stir. How to move through a corridor without the torches casting your shadow in ways that make the guards flinch. You can clear an entire hallway by walking down it. You're not sure if it's the bells or your reputation. Probably both. You learn how to make yourself laugh, quietly, mostly at nothing. A squeaky hinge, a pigeon landing sideways, a knight farting through a sermon. These things become little private performances, moments that belong only to you. You savour them like secret meals. You mimic the steward when he's not looking, perfect his stiff shoulders and clenched jaw. You draw crude faces in spilled beer and bow to them. You practice impressions of the priest's pious grimace, the baroness's fake tears, the knight who snorts when he sleeps, It's not about rehearsing, it's about surviving. If you don't laugh, you'll bite through your tongue instead. There's a mirror in the hallway near the guest rooms. Not glass, just polished bronze warped around the edges like it's trying to melt. At night, when no one's awake, you sit across from it and watch yourself. Not like a person, like a portrait that's grown tired of being stared at. The motley looks even worse in the warped metal, bright and lifeless all at once, like someone dressed up a carcass. Your face is a smear of angles and shadows. One eye droops a little more than it used to. One tooth is missing. You've stopped trying to smile in reflections. It feels like lying. One night, when the castle is too quiet to ignore, you look at yourself and say, "You're not funny," and the reflection nods. It shouldn't, but it does. Just once. Just a small dip of the chin, like someone humouring a child who's finally said something honest. You don't move, you don't blink, you just keep looking. You're not scared. If anything, it's the most seen you've felt in weeks, months maybe. You tilt your head. So does it. You frown. It grins. You say, "They'll forget me the second I fall down the stairs," and the grin widens. You half expect it to applaud. You start talking to it most nights. Not long conversations, just bits, little quips, observations, the kind of things you used to say to servants before they stopped responding. "They gave the dog a name, but not me," you say. "Isn't that something?" The mirror laughs, softly, sadly, exactly the way you do. It becomes a ritual. You perform for them by day and for yourself by night. You have no name here, no rank, no rights, but at least you have an audience, even if it's made of metal and regret. And unlike the nobles, this one never asks for more than you've already given. One night, you touch the mirror, just to see if it's warm. It's not. But for a moment, it feels like something touches back. Some nights, you think the applause sounds thinner than it used to. Other nights, you're not sure you heard any at all. The nobles are quieter these days, not somber, just bored in a new way. The deaths changed something. The feasts feel smaller, the fires burn lower, and the jokes have to work harder to be heard over the ache of collective indifference. And you've been here long enough that the rushes remember your limp before you do. It starts with a stumble. You'd done that trick 100 times before. The one where you leap over the wine cask and land in a somersault. You've never missed it. But tonight, your foot catches on the edge of someone's forgotten goblet and the landing doesn't come. Instead, you crumple sideways, a loud wet thunk as your ankle folds under you like a snapped chair leg. There's a brief pause in the hall. Then the room erupts, not in concern but laughter, the kind that hurts, the kind that keeps going long after you stop moving. You try to stand but your leg won't hold. Someone calls out, "Was that part of the act?" And another voice, a younger one, chirps, "Do it again!" You give them a grin. It's automatic now, a twitch wired deep into your face. Someone throws you a bread roll as a prize. It lands beside you in the rushes, already trampled. When you finally manage to hobble off to the corner, nobody follows. No one helps. They just turn back to their wine and meat and say, "He's getting old." That's the thing about being a fool. You don't get to age, you only get to slow down. And that's not the same thing. The bells stitched to your ankles used to sing when you danced. Now they drag. You hear them when you're still. When you lie awake at night trying to find a position that doesn't set your back screaming. You used to tumble with ease. Now you land with a grunt. You used to have comebacks ready before their sentence ended. Now your timing is just a breath too slow, and that breath costs you everything. There's another new fool now, younger still, louder still. The last one burned bright and vanished, as they often do. This one has just enough edge to keep them entertained, and just enough fear to stay in line. He's faster than you ever were, louder than you can stand, and young enough that bruises vanish overnight. The nobles love him, not the way they loved you once if they ever did, but in the way they love a new goblet, shiny, unchipped, and not yet stained with old wine and worse memories. He dances through your old routines, like he invented them, and they laugh harder than they ever did for you. He's not cruel, not exactly, but he doesn't leave space for you either. When the Lord gestures toward the dais, the boy bounds up. When they say fool, they mean him. When they say your name, if they remember it at all, it's with that tone, the one people use for things that should have been replaced by now. You try to tell yourself, it's just a season, a phase, the court shifts like weather. But deep down, you know the truth. You're not the jester anymore. You're the reminder that jesters wear out. Some days they forget to summon you altogether. Other times, they remember halfway through the meal and call you up with a flick of the wrist, as if it's your fault for not anticipating their boredom. You still perform when they ask, or demand, but your jokes land softer now. Your voice strains where it used to glide. You catch the winces before the laughter. You see the glances exchanged, the barely there nods that say, he's slipping. You feel it too, so you prepare something special, one last brilliant routine, a biting, beautiful bit of mimicry, the steward's pompous sermon cadence, the lady's endless gossip loop, the knight who always confuses pigs with peasants. It's risky, yes, but elegant, clever. It has rhythm, pacing, flair. You rehearse it until your throat aches and your leg trembles from holding the right pose. You wait for the moment. You time it perfectly. You deliver every line with precision and fire. And it doesn't land. There's a moment of silence, not the good kind, not the held breath, waiting for the punchline kind, but the flat, empty kind that sounds like a door clicking shut. A few people blink. Someone coughs. One noblewoman frowns, not offended, just confused. You see the new fool across the hall, head tilted like he's trying to figure out if you are doing a bit or having a fit. Then someone chuckles, awkwardly, and the moment passes. Your big joke is gone, evaporated into the steam rising from a greasy roast. You bow anyway. You have to. You bow because not bowing might be worse. You smile because not smiling might be fatal. And as you turn to limp back toward your corner, a silver goblet whistles through the air and hits you square in the cheek. You hear the impact before you feel it. Then comes the warmth. Not pain, not yet. Just heat and ringing ears. Your hand flies to your face and comes back slick with red. You can't tell if it's from your mouth or your nose, maybe both. There's laughter, of course. The thrower, a minor lord with too much wine and not enough imagination, is applauded. Someone yells, "Bullseye!" Another offers to fetch a second cup for a better shot. The new fool hesitates. He looks at you like he wants to help, like he might say something, but then he smiles instead and steps into the gap you've left behind. You wipe your face on your sleeve. You bow again. You don't remember standing back up. You don't get summoned often anymore. After the cup incident, your performances were trimmed to holidays and hangovers, the kind of nights when expectations were low and the nobles just wanted noise. You learn to bow a little lower, grin a little longer, and stay out of torchlight whenever possible. Sometimes the steward would forget you altogether, and you wouldn't be called for a week or more. Those stretches were strange, quiet, almost peaceful, if you ignored the ache in your joints and the way your name never passed anyone's lips. Then without warning, you're summoned during a feast. It isn't a grand occasion. No wedding, no victory, no foreign dignitary to impress. Just one of those long bloated banquets where the fire burns too hot and the wine flows too freely and the lord gets that bored, squinting look that usually ends with something broken or someone beaten. You're half asleep when the steward finds you, curled against the stone wall near the kitchen hearth, your motley jacket folded beneath your head like a pillow. He kicks you once, mutters your name and says, "Now." You limp into the hall, not bothering to tug your bell straight. The ankle never quite healed right. Every step hums with a dull heat that climbs into your hip by the time you reach the edge of the dais. You bow without flair and no one claps. That's fine. You weren't expecting applause. You weren't expecting anything. But they're looking at you now, with that glassy, overfed curiosity that always comes just before cruelty. Someone calls out, "The old fool returns," and another voice adds, "I thought he died." You bow again, deeper this time, as if confirming both statements. Then you begin. It starts with something safe, a parody of the cook, swearing at the scullions and dropping hens on the floor. You make a few half-hearted gestures, slip into the man's sputtering cadence, and hear a light chuckle from the third seat down. Encouraged, you pivot into the steward, always a favourite, with exaggerated stiffness and a voice like dried parchment. That gets more. Not belly laughs, but the kind of amused snorts that signal permission to keep going. So you do, but something shifts as you speak. You don't plan it, you barely notice it at first, a word here, a phrase there, and suddenly the jokes stop being about the servants. They start being about the lords, not directly, not insultingly, but the parallels sharpen. The story about the steward's penny pinching suddenly turns into a tale of a baron with tight fists and loose morals. A joke about the chaplain's sermons swerves into a commentary on prayers said for plague victims, while grain is hoarded behind stone walls. They laugh. They laugh harder than you've seen in months. Faces red, mouths open, some pounding fists on the table, as if trying to dislodge something from their own ribs. You keep talking. You don't know where it's coming from, this strange well of words that taste like truth, but are dressed in silk. You talk about loyalty, what it means to serve, to kneel, to nod when your neck itches from the strain. You joke about love, about how the lady of the court looks at the knight across the table and not her husband, and how everyone sees it except the one who matters. You talk about death, yours, theirs, anyone's, with a grin that feels almost sincere. The Lord laughs hardest of all. You know that should frighten you. When a man in power laughs that hard, it's often because he's already decided something, but you're too far in to stop. The words are already tumbling out, slick and sharp, and you're not sure if you're aiming them anymore, or just trying to empty your own mouth before something worse fills it. Then the room quiets. Not all at once, but gradually, like a tide receding. Someone coughs. A goblet clinks against the edge of a plate. A woman leans forward, lips parted, as if she's not sure whether to applaud or cross herself. You finish your bit. No flourish, no bow, just the final line. Soft and strange. But what do I know? I'm only the one allowed to say it. And then they laugh. Loud. Loud enough that your ears ring. Laughter that stretches and doubles back on itself. Overlapping in waves. It doesn't sound like joy. It doesn't even sound like mockery. It sounds like relief, like the court has held its breath too long and only now remembers how to exhale. People clutch their sides. Someone wipes a tear. The Lord stands, clapping slowly, nodding to no one in particular. You wait for the next cue, for the steward to wave you back, for a coin to be tossed, for a command to spin or bow or grovel. Nothing comes, so you bow. Once, deeply, arms spread, bells silent, and then you turn. You walk down the hall with your head high, though your spine screams and your feet drag unevenly. No one stops you. No one calls you back. The guards at the door step aside. Even the dogs, those miserable beasts trained to bark at everything unfamiliar, stay curled in their corners, watching you with glassy eyes. Outside, the night is quiet, damp. The air smells like wood smoke and frost and something faintly metallic. You realise, as you pass beneath the archway and out into the dark, that you still don't know if that was your retirement or your execution. You only know they laughed, and that, for once, you didn't. No one remembers exactly when you left. One day, the steward found your corner empty and shrugged. The cook muttered something about finally having quiet near the hearth. A scullery boy swore he saw you walking toward the woods at dawn, motley sleeves trailing in the mud. But no one chased after you. No one asked why you left or where you went. No one needed to. The halls carried on. New scandals replaced old ones. The Lord grew older, thinner around the temples, but no wiser in temper. The new fool was younger, sharper. and considerably more careful. His motley fit better, but it never hung with quite the same weight. He juggled, he rhymed, he never mentioned death or longing or politics. People said he was a delight. Somewhere beyond that castle, the world moved on. Plagues came and went, borders shifted, languages curled differently around jokes. The ones you told, the ones that once made dukes spit wine, went quiet. You might have lived a long time after, or not. You might have collapsed in the woods with your bells wrapped around your wrist like a shackle. Or maybe you became something else entirely. A farmer, a vagrant, a name muttered in a tavern story no one quite believes. It doesn't matter, because now it's been years or centuries, or no time at all, depending on how memory works. The image of you survives, but only the outline. The costume, not the man. The grin, not the ache in the cheeks. The legacy is tidy, bright, harmless. Somewhere, a child tugs a jester hat over their ears and giggles into a mirror, not realising what the bells once meant, not understanding that the motley was never a symbol of joy, just visibility, just a way to be seen when nothing else about you was allowed to stand out. They sell masks now, smiling ones, plastic and smooth, stretched in permanent cheer. Sometimes they're bright red and green, colours no actual jester wore. Sometimes they've got little tears painted beneath the eyes as if that counts as nuance. They don't tell the story of the bruised ribs or the missing teeth or the nights spent whispering jokes to a crack in the wall just to feel like someone was listening. In museum corners under glass, there's a stick, bladder on the end, faded with age. The plaque says something cheerful. Used for comedic effect by court jesters in medieval Europe. It doesn't say you used it to defend yourself, or that sometimes you curled around it like a pillow when the floors were too cold, or that the sound it made, that little hollow whack, was often the only thing louder than your thoughts. And they still tell the stories in a way. They say fools had license to speak truth to power, as if truth was ever welcome, as if your job wasn't to smuggle honesty inside a joke and pray it wasn't unwrapped too quickly. They say you balanced the court like a scale, but no one remembers what it felt like to be the weight. You show up in paintings now, not often, and never with your name, always as a background detail, bent in some impossible pose beside a throne, mouth open mid-laugh, eyes painted wrong. No one wonders who you were, just what role you filled. Even the word changed. Fool. Once a title, now an insult, or a punchline, or something on a novelty card. You're a meme now, somewhere. Your legacy boiled down to 6 words and a typo. Someone wears your likeness to a party, stumbles around with a toy scepter, and thinks they understand performance. But they don't know what you risked. They don't feel the way a feast hall could tighten when a laugh didn't come. They don't know how your chest locked when a joke landed too hard, or how your heart climbed into your throat when the wrong man scowled. They don't know about the bishop, or the boot, or the cup, or the night you bowed too long because you couldn't think of how to stand again. They don't know you once streamed in silence, that in those rare hours between duties when no one needed a rhyme, or a pratfall or a biting line, you wanted something else. A name maybe, a room with a door, a hand on your shoulder that didn't shove, a laugh you didn't have to earn, just once. They think you are happy, they call you the funny one, they forget the price of that title, and maybe that's fitting. Maybe that's all you ever were meant to be, a mask passed down, a grin too wide to question. You were the shape of tension breaking, the release, the echo, never the voice. But sometimes, when the firelight is just right and the wine hits wrong, and someone at the edge of a party slips into quiet, they think of you. They don't know why. Just that something in the room feels off, like a laugh came a little too fast, or a joke was too sharp, or a story ended without quite landing. And they hear a sound, faint, metallic, like a bell in the dirt. That brings us to the end of tonight's story, a painted smile peeled back to reveal the silence underneath. a life spent twisting tension into laughter until even your name slipped out the side of history's mouth. If you'd like early access to more quietly unsettling histories, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with other forgotten lives and overlooked tragedies you'd like to see explored. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps more people find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S., Amanda Lamkey, and Rich Davis. Sleep well.